All right, well, good morning. This is the first Water and Wastewater Utilities Committee meeting of 2026. Just for everyone's knowledge, the two board members that are appointed to this committee are Deborah Logan and Wayne Peterson. Wayne Peterson couldn't make it, and so Board President Naveed Fardanish is serving in his place, but Wayne Peterson is expected to be on the committee here. So your first item is to appoint a chair and a vice chair for this committee. And so again, it should be the board's bylaws require the board member attendees, the board member committee members that are on the board serve as the chair and vice chair. So Wayne Peterson and or Deborah Logan should be the chair and vice chair.
So I'm going to recommend by default that I be the chair and Wayne co-chair, since he's not able to be here.
Sounds good.
Okay, so then moving on, we've got agenda item 1 completed. And moving on to the general permit update, the committee will receive a review of the general order wastewater discharge permit. So who's going to be speaking to that, Eric or Lori? Or you, Jeff?
Well, I can introduce this topic.
Justin's here.
Yeah. So
I just know Justin is capacity as assistant manager.
So I just wanted to provide just a little bit of background on this, and then there's some items we want to kind of highlight. And we actually expect Eileen Shields from MKN to join the meeting and be a resource for you as well. Let me see if I can blow this up.
The top.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So as the committee members are likely aware, certainly the board members are aware, we've been in this sort of enrollment process for an updated permit for several years. We've known about it for many years. We were asked to apply to enroll a little over 2 years ago, and we completed our application in the summer of 2023 to enroll in the permit. And then we were just essentially waiting. There have been a few minor inquiries in the months leading up to this past winter. And then in early February, we received a draft permit. The draft permit looked a lot like what we'll walk you through here. In the draft permit, we noticed there were a number of discrepancies, some things that were just sort of factually incorrect, and a number of things that we thought needed to be remedied. And so we put together a response letter in early March back to the regional board requesting various changes, and they turned it around really quickly, like in about a week and a half's time, and on March 23rd issued us a new permit. And this was included in your packet. This is something that we've been anticipating, not that we're necessarily ready for or can make good on today, but we wanted to kind of highlight that the contents of there's a kind of a cover letter that goes through this. There are a number of deadlines that are included in the permit in terms of detailing a monitoring and reporting program, which still has to be sorted out, et cetera. And we have a deadline to apply for a time service, it's essentially a period of time that we can comply with the permit that might be over the next 5 or 10 years. Additionally, there's some details about our fees to the regional board with this permit, which are a little higher than we've been accustomed to paying. But I think what I want to highlight here are really the things that we remain engaged with the regional board on. There are a few items even in this final permit that we still think are worthy of further discussion, or we have a sort of a different point of view on, and I'll bring those up. And we're happy to kind of, I guess, answer questions about any of the contents of the permit. But okay, so super. So Eileen, I think is on the meeting, and she's been a resource for us as we've gone through this process as well, and is available to answer questions.
And Eileen is with whom?
MKN.
Our consultant.
Yes. Yeah, they're the group that's working on the water wastewater master plan.
Okay.
Essentially, there's a a few issues, in here. So this, I'll just wanna highlight some of the things that I think we got resolved between the draft permit and the final permit. The draft permit included like daily, influent limitations and that really, that wasn't gonna work for us. And so we requested that they continue just to limit us into essentially average, um, daily effluent at 600,000 gallons. That's what our current permit or our prior permit, listed us as. This is about our current average effluent, or it's actually lower than this, but we're about, 400,000 gallons a day is what we're bringing in today. But we obviously have big spikes during storms and whatnot. It's gonna be somewhat problematic if those items were made.
So what did they have prior to that?
Who's they?
The California Water Board, whomever this letter is, because you're talking about the discrepancies have been resolved.
I was referring to the draft permit that had some additional limits in there in terms of influent limitations as opposed to just effluent limitations. Those were removed. They're not in our old permit either. I say our old, they're not in the permit that was in existence prior to this permit, but they were in a draft permit for about 6 weeks.
So was the draft permit initiated by us? No.
Well, I mean, we were told to apply for it, if that
Okay,
means something. So, but no, we did not ask for it. We were told to apply for it, so we've been anticipating it. We did not request daily influent limitations, but they had included those, and so we requested those be
Okay.
removed, and they have. The regional board staff did a really good job in most areas of addressing our initial concerns, our concerns that were raised on the February draft.
Okay.
There are a couple concerns that remain, and maybe I'll just jump to those because I think it probably doesn't matter a whole lot about what the progress we've made to date. It matters more about what's left to do. And
Yeah, I'm sorry, real quick on the 600,000, and then you said that's our limit, we're doing 400,000. So that's the water that's, the wastewater that's coming into Meadowbrook, right?
well, the 600,000 is the water that's leaving, whether it's
Leaving, okay,
through
so-
Selby effluent.
Okay,
So leaving the plant
So-
either through at the Selby site or at the Sprayfield site.
how does a Nazi water affect that?
Not really, it's not contained within this permit.
Isn't, okay, so that's not part of the 400,000, okay.
It affects us though, it absolutely affects us, just not through the permit, right? Cause we have a physical limitation and we've got challenges about how much water we can actually put at Selby. But it's not impacted by the permit.
Yeah, I just was wondering down the road when we're moving that away from Selby Ponds, how is that gonna have any effect with this?
It will, but only on a qualitative, water quality standpoint, probably not on a volume standpoint. But there may be reasons, if anything, there's reasons to try to keep some of the water there.
Oh, yeah, for blending.
For various, some benefits. Anyhow, the result, this is our list of our current operators and their permit numbers, et cetera. Those are things that were updated in the new permit. We were able to get some acknowledgement of the spray field. There was some concern leading into the winter and with the draft permit that the spray field may not be included with this permit. We're able to resolve those discrepancies, and there's a reference to the spray field. And again, that's really for us treated like an emergency. Maybe that's too strong of a word. It's a kind of a plan B discharge only when circumstances prevent us from discharging at Selby and we don't have enough storage capacity using the spray field. So that was a nice to get resolved in here. There are some records, some documents of our current and more recent constituent levels that we've reported. And then there's some records of before and after the point of discharge, what's found in the underlying receiving water, I'll say. I think that one of just so you're aware, The points upon which these are read are highly influenced by our effluent, I'm sorry, even though it's called like maybe up gradient. That sampling well or monitoring well is so close to the Selby discharge point that, in my opinion, it's being influenced by Selby. It's not truly a reflection of the background groundwater because it's just so close to the location of the ponds. Okay, here's the effluent limitations. This we're satisfied with at this point. Here's I'm just gonna scroll down to the area of the greatest concern. This comes in this table 8. And just to provide again a little bit of background, when we received the draft permit in early February, in a couple of areas, it contained different limitations. For example, under TDS or total dissolved solids, the draft limitation was 730, as I recall, parts per million or milligrams per liter. And boron, as another example that was a little different, was 0.3. We replied in our early March letter back to the regional board that we believe that the effluent quality, these water quality standards were being inappropriately applied in Templeton because our receiving water or the location of our discharge is not into the Paso Robles Basin or even the Atascadero Basin, the Paso Robles formation of the Atascadero Basin, but rather into the underflow of the Salinas River, which is in Templeton anyway, fairly separated. There's a kind of a solid clay layer that's been demonstrated that keeps those water sources from merging, at least in this general area. I couldn't speak intelligently about what happens in King City or closer to the Pacific Ocean, whether that is maintained. But in this general vicinity, there's not a lot of interaction between the underflow of the river and the deeper basin. So it's somewhat unique. The staff person we are in primary contact with at the regional board replied with, okay, if that's the case, we're likely gonna give you XYZ limits. And for just a moment here, those look very favorable. With the exception of TDS, all the other limits, all the other constituent limits were gonna be quite a bit more acceptable or livable. You know, we were more likely to achieve compliance with those I guess I'll say for just a brief moment, draft limits. And then we received this final permit again a week later when they didn't maintain those teaser limits that came previously. So we have responded. Actually, just today, there's a copy of this letter that's been placed before you, asking that our staff be able to work with the regional board staff on a couple of these constituent limits, notably TDS and boron, which were both lower than the initial draft and permit from early February. And the rationale for why they are lower, we're not. I guess I'm not fully. You know, I'm not sure I fully understand why the rationale is placed. I think it's been explained to us that was your old permit limits, and since your receiving water might be different than your neighbors or what we initially thought or drafted, then we're going to just maintain those limits. But they are, particularly in the case of TDS, a real significant problem for us. The draft limit of 730 was going to be a problem for us, likely. But lowering this down to 500 will present a much bigger problem. Keep in mind our source water, you know, before anything is done to it, has a TDS that's considerably higher than 500. So none of our water supplies, as we deliver them to customers, achieve, you know, would even meet this new standard. Wow. Before anything is done to the water, you think about in a case like TDS. It gets worse as people use it, like even in your home, As you use shampoo or dishwash, as you wash your dishes, the TDS increases because you're adding, soaps and other things that get dissolved in the water, and so it worsens. Anyhow, those are the areas that we've requested further discussion with the regional board. And prior to our formal request, they had offered to do so. They'd offered to continue to consult with us and have pointed out that, yeah, there can be still can be some changes to this permit. And I think the permit was issued in kind of a rushed fashion. I mean, they only gave themselves like a week and a half from the time we first responded to issuing the permit, and maybe wasn't enough time to flush some of these things out. And so those are the material matters that I think we might have some hope of getting some minor adjustments to.
So that's what this letter
That's, yes,
is dated to.
that's what this letter that's dated today.
So
is related to.
if with TDS, they stick to this 500, does that mean, I know we had a pilot program where we brought in the filtration system from a company that was in Florida. Would that means that we would have to consider that? Is that how you?
So that
make it
filtration
TDS?
system was designed to reduce suspended solids. It doesn't do anything for dissolved solids.
Okay.
So these are particulates that really can't be, you need something like RO or something to remove it from the water, and that's,
No whole new system
Oh, okay, so-
to address that particular item.
yes. And even at a TDS limit of 730, we're gonna have challenges. Likely, again, there's some details, like it depends on what the sampling point ends up being. But again, because our source water, is somewhere around that 700 to 7, a little more than 700, depending on where it comes from on average. So, it is if we're going to be expected to meet a TDS standard and that standard's lower than our source water, it's going to be a significant challenge for us. But 500 is, we're not gonna, we would not achieve that without significant investment in the plant. 730, there's some hope that we would try various things, and over time we could improve it and maybe get close. So we're gonna work with the regional board to see if they're amenable to discussing this particular point and consider revising the permit. This is lower than our neighboring agencies in terms of TDS. It's punitive from that point of view.
What about sodium? Is sodium something, is that 75, is that okay?
So I don't know if it's okay. I guess what I'd say is that's what the draft permit showed as well. So it doesn't look like it got worse. It didn't get more punitive for us. But so chloride, sodium, those are components of TDS, right? So yes, these are going to be areas of challenge for us to meet. I would say in the very short term, we're focused on this because we want to get the permit right. In the medium term, our challenges are going to be maybe related to some other areas, because as we understand it, the regional board's focus isn't necessarily on TDS in terms of enforcement, but rather on other constituent levels, such as nitrate or total nitrogen. And that's an area that we also have some concerns. I think that was an area that we've known for quite some time that our plant would struggle to achieve, but there's some specifics that need to be sorted out here. And for example, where's the point of compliance and getting that monitoring and reporting plan resolved with the regional board over time will indicate how much work we need to do at the plant to achieve that compliance. For example, the more dilution and further downstream the monitoring well is, the greater chance of success we'll have in meeting more of these requirements.
So Justin, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I would point out that when the Regional Water Control Board is connecting the 500 milligrams per liter TDS limitation and or the boron, they're lending in the old it's actually still kind of in place. It's being adopted, but the existing permit notes those groundwater limitations in our permit. Our point of compliance, though, right now is in our effluent. It's not in the groundwater. And so what's significant, the change going on here is that our point of compliance is moving from the effluent, from the end of the treatment train to groundwater. And so then they're using that 500 milligram per liter that is in our permit right now, but it's not tied to our compliance, our point of compliance. It's noted in the existing permit. They're using it yet again here, and I believe Eileen mentioned that that possibly through their process, they can't lend to a less stringent limitation than what was ever noted in your previous permit without some other additional processes. And we may be getting into those. We're going to certainly encourage folks to elevate this 500 milligram per liter threshold, but it's a big difference is to go from your point of compliance at your effluent to the point of compliance in the groundwater. Let me also just say that with the effluent, we have a mean and max. So through the year, if you're taking multiple samples, you have that mean you can identify. You also have that one time, that really high sample, that really high result. And so you can violate these constituents at your effluent, at your point of compliance, through mean or through max. Okay, we're moving the point of compliance through this new general permit. We're moving it to the groundwater. And as such, they're also changing the interval in which, if you will, that those compliances are had. And so that's 25-month rolling median now is what they're, instead of a max or a mean, it's a 25-month rolling median rather than that kind of one-time snapshot of what's in the ground. As General Manager was noting, we have work to do on several fronts with reports, updating our operations and maintenance manual for the wastewater treatment plant, a climate adaptation plan, a time schedule order, as the General Manager was mentioning, that's going to buy us some time to assess, analyze the treatment plant, collect data, ongoing. And so the General Manager was pointing out we have to make good on a groundwater monitoring plan. That is due September of 2027. And that will, in that plan, we will note where we're going to be taking our samples, how we're going to be taking those samples, how we're going to be reporting. As the General Manager was pointing out, this is the groundwater, moving the point of compliance to groundwater, and these limitation thresholds are two of the largest issues that we have, and we're ongoing, still working with the Regional Water Control Board to kind of to better our situation.
Yeah, because it sounds like it's rippling through all of your operations and everything you do. So yeah, they've kind of moved the goalpost.
So just, I don't, if you could explain for me, please. So you are moving the point of compliance from effluent to underground water. Shouldn't that be better for us? I'm trying to tell, because the underground water shouldn't be cleaner, less tedious, or is it backwards? It increases the tedious.
So the Regional Water Control Board staff had mentioned along this process that in their view, looking over historical data, there was no way that we were going to comply at our effluent with TDS, chloride, and sodium. There was just not going to be a way at all. And the best bet was to use, groundwater as the point of compliance. To your question about treatment, it's different. TDS, chloride, and sodium is very different than total nitrogen. There are means that our other agencies all around us have used to build mechanical activated sludge treatment plants to deal with total nitrogen. That's something that's feasible. It's very expensive. Some of our neighbors to the south maybe are looking at $150 million new treatment plant to deal with stuff like total nitrogen. TDS, chloride and sodium are different. And so those are really dealt with, as General Manager was pointing out, reverse osmosis is really what's in line with treating for TDS, chloride and sodium. The most recent communications we've received from Regional Water Control Board on that front is that they also don't have a wanting to build reverse osmosis treatment on the back end of a wastewater treatment plant for $15 million. And then create even the brine, all these sort of byproducts that come from that treatment. And what are you doing with that? And where is that going? That sort of situation. So as the General Manager pointed out, they've communicated this is your limitation. We're not necessarily going to enforce it right now, which is an uncomfortable situation for us because we're not sure if, you know, depending on staff changing over the years, what's going to happen. Anyhow, that's kind of where.
So we have kind of a window, I think, to continue to work with the regional board before this thing is sort of more set in stone. And right now we have a good relationship with the staff members of the regional board who are our regulators. And we're hoping that they're receptive to some of our comments. We'd like to keep this informal and casual as possible and not try to take advantage of this small window to get the most, I don't want to say favorable, that's certainly the right term, but the accurate limitations that are appropriate for our system.
Well, I
Yeah.
think also to Justin's point too, is we don't want something that is, well, we're not going to enforce it right now. Because you're right, if there are personnel changes, we don't know what that will lead to. So I appreciate you working to get something that's going to be at least achievable.
Does Eileen want to make any comment?
I'm sure she does. I did want to just point out just real quickly about, because some of these things are kind of technical in nature. This is a little diagram of both the plant and then I think for this discussion about what Selby looks like. And right now, we have these, again, this lower box shows the Selby site. Most of our wastewater is percolated in these two ponds right here. And then we have for many years kind of used these two ponds primarily for the Nacimiento water. But the draft permit says that this monitoring well here, we call it monitoring well 3, or it's labeled monitoring well 3, will be the point of compliance. It's the downstream well. And I think right now, we don't take sampling at these locations in the kind of intervals that are going to be required. So we can't state necessarily that our historic records are indicative of what really happens there. We don't take monthly readings and we don't sample for all those same constituents.
Like boron.
And like boron. And we also use these current ponds with the Nasi effluent, which at this well site, in my mind, is probably effectively diluting those figures. Or those readings when we're discharging Nacimiento water, which is most, you know, over the past, say, decade, it's been most of the time, but certainly not all of the time.
How frequently do you monitor from that well site currently?
Twice a year, and it would
Twice a
be
year?
increasing
Oh,
to
wow,
4
so
times.
this is a big change.
Yeah, and on that same point, on the influent sampling, they're looking in the monitoring and reporting program. Now we would be doing composite sampling on a quarterly basis of our influent. We haven't had to do any composite sampling, so there's a number of changes even in besides the groundwater, even in the treatment plant, about how often and what type of samplings we do. We sent off those initially when we received in the draft permit, the monitoring and reporting program. We sent that off to FGL, Fruit Growers Laboratories. That's who we contract with to do our laboratory analysis, and they provided costs so we could try and incorporate those in our upcoming budget. So.
Anyways, because we don't have necessarily the data that would predict what results we're going to receive, we're going to achieve, you know, see here in the long run. It's a little bit of a guessing game. We hadn't been required to monitor for certain constituents or as frequently. So, but I just wanted you to kind of get a visual on
So
how the Selby site. This
compliance
is
levels would be.
well, yeah. This is going to be. We're going to know more as we go. But we have this, I think, little window of opportunity to try to get the permit to be in the best shape possible before we, again, attempt to, achieve compliance. But I think, Justin's, you know, there are some positives that come out of this, and one of which is a downstream monitoring well for compliance might be to our advantage with some of the constituents. Particularly as we've used Selby in the recent past with both Nasi water and wastewater. But it does, in the long run, as we forecast, you know, larger wastewater flows, and I'm thinking of the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, our ability to utilize these ponds for Nasi water is expected to go down. So some of that blend value might not be steady as wastewater volumes increase. Anyhow, yeah, Eileen is on the, I'm gonna see if I can just bring up her,
Can I throw out a few questions? And
yes,
just not trying to, I'm just trying to understand a little bit better. So we have a current permit for this, right?
yes.
Okay, and you probably mentioned it, but there's a lot of data here. The changes between previous permit and this permit, because obviously we were in compliance before, correct?
I wouldn't go so far, no. We have a permit that's kind of like a special, a permit that was more unique to Templeton. And generally, yes, we were compliant, but there have been times we've been reporting violations. For example, if that TDS was supposed to be 500 at the effluent, I'm gonna go ahead and venture a guess that we've never been compliant with TDS.
Well, that's not very high, you know, 500 TDS or parts per million is really not like, you know, my parents' well water probably would be that, if not more, which is actually not a bad thing either, which is interesting. So I'd be curious, because total dissolved solvents could be a lot of different things in it. So 500 is sort of just an arbitrary number, because it could be 500 of good things, trace minerals and salts and things that would be good for you, or it could be 500 of not so good things. So I'd be curious to get a little bit more data on, you know, the rationale behind those. Not that it would change anything, that's just for me to understand what they're trying to accomplish. So but based on what I'm saying, and it's also interesting to me that we had to monitor effluent, and now we're able to monitor. What's their goal behind that? Because their goal is obviously to have safe water, right? That's the goal of all this, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna pull, see if I can get Eileen's, thing under.
Can you guys hear me?
She can answer,
And this, at the end of the day, having consistent monitoring, but like monthly
Trying to find that out right now.
It would be good to have them build that into the requirements
Yeah.
of like, hey, we have some data, but it's not exactly what we want. We weren't even testing for boron.
To
So-
your point, the monitoring and reporting program doesn't take effect until Q3, which is July 1st.
Yeah,
And so I would suggest that the monitoring and reporting in the new permit starts July 1st. That starts the clock on the 25-month rolling median.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then just my last question, if we cannot be compliant, we get through whatever amount of months they decide, there's a challenge with it. I'm not sure what that is. It obviously would depend on what the challenge is. If you're at 505 TDS, is that really gonna be, what's the tolerance in that? If it's something major, I mean, my guess is you have to create some sort of filtration system. And so what would be the, worst case scenario on this whole thing?
Yeah, sure.
And what that would look like. And, obviously we don't want to have that happen. And again, I don't think that's gonna happen, but I was just curious to what that would look like.
Yeah, they're talking right now about not necessarily enforcing it. That's tough to deal with down the line. If you were to your question about past violations, if you were to go into our history and GeoTracker states database, you're going to see a number of violations that have to do with total nitrogen and have to do with TDS, chloride or sodium. But those are connected to the point of compliance at the effluent and not groundwater. So
Well, in the effluent, to be fair, I mean, we want it to be clean, but no one's drinking that, it's going somewhere and we want to make sure it doesn't mix. It seems like something that it's a good thing to do and this is all like a good exercise. But at the end of the day, what are they gonna do? Shut off our water? And I'm guessing that.
They are in the process of, because of this, they're in the process of improving the infrastructure, and they're getting estimates around $150 million.
But I'm guessing.
And ASO have to do the same thing.
Because it's one, obviously Templeton CSD doesn't have 150 million, not that they would need it.
Well,
but
ours is gonna probably, if we have to do it,
Yeah, I think Eileen's on the,
Yeah,
so I don't know, Eileen, if you can hear us now, we had a reset.
yeah.
We had a
Well,
reset
I'm guessing
the-
there would be like a lot of grants and funding for that because obviously it's almost like what's the disaster?
Well,
Grants
you know what,
yeah.
every small system is looking at these exact same changes.
Mhm.
So it's a statewide.
we're
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
the last, we're kind of the
And
last
the
ones.
water board, I don't know completely understands the knock-on effects to all ratepayers. So this is what we're trying to figure out as a small district and system and how we can mitigate how we respond to it. And there have been, the whole conversation of we are going to enforce. And then there's been conversations of like how we have some programs and things to reduce, say, salts. And there might be programs that other people are doing about TDS. And so we say how we're mitigating this, even though we're not meeting these requirements, is X, Y, and Z. So we ban, salt, water softeners, or, other various things that people might use in our service area that would contribute to it. And then on, water treatment side, maybe we do some water treatment, there's a lot of different ways to attack it if we cannot meet the limits.
Yeah.
That might not result in, a wastewater treatment plant that costs $50 million. But Eileen actually probably has some good pointers. Bill Callahan with Wallace Group, I've talked to him about quite a few.
Maybe we can,
She's with our-
I would like to get
Understand.
consultants.
Yeah.
So let's go.
Can I'm sorry, because this is, okay, now I see Eileen's, got her mute off. Can you hear us, Eileen?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about the
I
hiccups
missed some of it.
on our end.
Um,
Maybe you can just in a broad way, again, just to provide background to the committee members. We, the district, hired MKN to do our water and wastewater master plan, and as a part of that master planning effort, there was some, broad overview of the wastewater plant and what types of improvements might be necessary to comply with the new general permit. And maybe, and I know, Eileen, we haven't actually seen that data necessarily yet, but is there anything in general you could share with the committee about what's it likely gonna take to achieve compliance with the new permit?
So, um, I think the strategy that we're moving towards is compliance with the conventional wastewater treatment effluent limits, the BOD and TSS, and looking at, what would be required to add nitrogen removal to that, because that can be done with biological processes. So we're working with vendors to see what the options would be for that. The salts and the groundwater limits are a different story. So, as mentioned by your staff a few times, the only thing that you can do to treat and remove the TDS, the chloride, the sodium, etc., is reverse osmosis. That's the only proven method. You may find other stuff out there, flash distillation, and some things that aren't conventional in municipal systems yet, but it would be reverse osmosis if you wanted to treat to remove salts. That's not practical. Um, it's very expensive. Maybe we could find grants and monies to build the system, but the ongoing operations and maintenance of such a system is exorbitant. Because of what Justin pointed out, you're having to deal with the brine, and then also the electricity costs. The water board knows this. However, there's been ongoing policy from the state handed down to the regional board for a long time now, looking at addressing the problem of increasing concentrations of salts and nutrients in our groundwaters. Um, and so I think that's what this general permit, that's what the regional board is trying to address with this general permit that they're applying to the major municipal dischargers in the region. So as Lori was alluding to, this permit is based on a general permit that they're trying to apply to all of the dischargers that have municipal plants that are discharging over 100,000 gallons per day. And so there's various tools within that general permit to apply it to each discharger, but it doesn't always fit well. And there's a lot that are there's a lot of agencies that are struggling with how to comply with these groundwater limitations for salts right now. Um, we've been talking with the water board for a couple of agencies working with this, and it seems currently the direction that they're trying to get people to go in is look at programs like Lori was talking about for pretreatment, source control. Um, there's tools written into the permit for the groundwater monitoring plan and the time schedule compliance plan, for instance, that allows us to take some time and look at it and do some studies and some work to figure out the best way to show compliance. I also want to point out that the groundwater limitation does indicate that, how's it worded? Let me pull it up very quickly. I have it right here. The Templeton CSD must demonstrate that the discharge does not cause underlying groundwater to exceed the water quality objectives set forth. So it's based on upstream and downstream monitoring. And so we have a couple challenges here because we need to make sure that we're confident and show the water board that the upstream and downstream monitoring points are appropriate. And then additionally, like was described, we don't believe that we're discharging to the Paso Robles Templeton area groundwater basin. And so finding the correct limits and then the upstream and downstream monitoring points is going to be something that we can propose to the water board in a groundwater monitoring plan and kind of hopefully buy some time in that manner where we're working with the water board to put together appropriate limitations and monitoring and reporting program. But, at this point, this is the final permit. I believe the water board um, it's being notified to the board itself today or tomorrow at their meeting.
This is Eric Marlowe. What's your biggest concern with the water and the current information that we have on it. Obviously, ideally, if we had to do anything, just doing, you know, nitrogen reduction. So of all the different matrices, what's the challenge that you foresee the most of? And then additionally, what, well, let's just start with that. What's the main concern right now? Also, do you happen to know how the state decided that these numbers were the numbers? Because I always find that interesting, where some bureaucrat comes up with what they think's appropriate. And not that we can change the state law, but I'm just always curious are these actually reasonable numbers, or are they just some things?
So,
Decided was
yeah, I'll start with if you want me to jump in, sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Okay.
Cut me off. I'll ramble a little bit, so.
Sorry about that. With your last question, you know, where did they come up with these numbers? So for the groundwater limitations, the majority of these are based on the Regional Water Quality Control Board's basin plan and the water quality objectives that are set in that basin plan. So the data that was developed for that comes back from like the 80s. Every regional board has a basin plan. It looks at all the surface water and groundwaters in their region. And for some bodies of water and groundwaters, they set water quality objectives based on data at the time. And so the majority of this table for the groundwater limitations comes from that, with the exception of those two constituents that Jeff was pointing out, the total dissolved solids and the boron. And there's a footnote on those. Those come from your previous permit. And the reason why they did that, in my understanding, is there's a rule, there's like an anti-backsliding rule or something like that that they have, where if they're putting together a new permit or a renewed permit for an agency, they can't provide less strict of limits unless there's some substantive change. And so because your previous permit had lower limits for TDS and boron than the basin plan groundwater quality objectives for this basin that they're saying that we're discharging to, they had to use the lower, more restrictive limit from your previous permit. There's a lot of mismatching in this, in my opinion. The previous permit, they did have groundwater limitations, but as Justin said, it wasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they were a compliant, like it wasn't a point of compliance, right? And so there weren't necessarily automatic violations or issues with that. It was a monitoring that they were requiring, monitoring, reporting, but they weren't pinning you to it. They also had different monitoring points described in that permit. I believe the monitoring point for these the groundwater limits in the previous permit was the Smith well, which is like a mile and a half downstream. And so now they're bringing it back to a closer point. And so there's a lot of mismatching. And then, you know, the bigger issue is that we don't think these limits are even appropriate because we're not discharging to this groundwater basin that they're grabbing these limits, these water quality objectives for. And we made that comment, but as your general manager noted, this was, you know, they had our application for what, like 3 years, and then they gave us a month to respond, and then they issued the permit in 1 week. They were working on a timeline, so it is what it is. But there are some tools. We've requested a meeting. The staff seems amenable to meeting and discussing, but we'll have to see where they go from that. But even if they say we can't reopen this, we can't change these permits at this point, that there's tools that we can use to make our point and buy some time in the compliance avenue. What am I most concerned about? It's the salts, because no one really knows how we're supposed to show compliance. when I say no one, I mean, you know, all of the dischargers are dealing with this, not all of them, but a lot of them are dealing with it. Atascadero, Nipomo, San Luis Obispo.
What are our salt levels typically out of that location?
mm, I can try and pull it up. Justin, I don't know if you
Off the
have
top of
it
my head.
off the top of your head.
Whack, you know, I was just curious, are we within a few hundred parts per million, or are we within, 1,000 parts per total dissolved solvents?
I thought we were close to the limitations for it. Specifically, you're talking about with sodium.
Well, it's,
But it really doesn't matter because the
It-
point of, the point of which the testing is done is gonna change. So it doesn't really matter where we're at currently.
well, I was talking about that well specifically, because we do have
Yeah,
data on
Smith
that
well.
well. They test it biannually.
At that well,
At that well.
we've only been sampling it twice a year, and we would be sampling
Yeah,
it
so we'd be
four times.
sampling, yeah.
But the data that we had showed history, historically, we've been very close to that limitation. If you look at it from a 25-month rolling median, it got a little bit worse for us. Like maybe it was a little bit higher, a little bit elevated over the last couple of years than it was, 12 years ago,
Yeah.
15 years ago.
Well, and where I'm going with this, and Eileen and team is, if it's 500, okay, that's the number, gotta meet that number, and we're at 550 over 25 months, what's the state's view on that? Cause it seems like over 50 or 100, parts per million are total dissolved solvents. I'd just be curious to, is there a way we can structure the permit that, hey, we're gonna meet these, but, based on whatever, what's that window?
Yeah, to your question, I think we had a shot at that 7:30. When we had TDS set at 7:30 in the draft, we had a chance to try and, to make good on that. That's what the draft permit earlier that was sent over to us. It noted 7:30 as the limitation for TDS, and I think we would have had a really good shot at 7:30. Sometimes we would have been over that slightly.
Sure.
Sometimes maybe just underneath it, but 500, as the general manager pointed out, and Eileen and Lord, 500 is like, all bets are off.
I mean, shoot, even RO waters, can have some TDS, not obviously done in the hundreds, but it's like, that's not a super insane number. So I'm just curious why the state decided that's the number and what the flexibility, because they might, but building a $50 or $80 million plant over, 50 or 100 TDS. Anyway, I don't think we need to.
Yeah, because I mean, going with regulators, because I've had many experience with regulators, it's like, it changes with people and I don't want to I think we need to look towards compliance. So it sounds like that's one of the issues that you're gonna be negotiating, again.
We're gonna
with
attempt
the regional
to,
board.
yeah, we're gonna attempt to. So our first, again, you have a copy of the letter that went out to them today. Requesting a meeting to talk about these couple of key points. But in the meantime, we have to start complying with everything else in the order and everything else in the permit, which requires quite a bit of new sampling protocols, putting together this monitoring plan, submitting a time service order request to get us more time to comply. And so there'll be this is sort of fluid, and there's going to be recommendations coming out about how we can achieve compliance
The transition.
over time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have a question or comment. I'm a little bit hesitant about this, but once the negotiations with the water board in terms of our permits settles down and we know where we stand, and if the levels are where we are now, do you guys think, and I always thought maybe the water board wants to address this as a regional level. So do you think that at some point it would be good to have the discussion, and you may have already started having discussion with the Atascadero, because they are building the infrastructure for us to see how we could work with them to, I guess, in areas, leverage and mutually benefit, each other. I mean, because if we do have to spend that kind of money, if we get to that point, and I know we may be a couple of years behind Atascadero, but should we speed up that timeline based on this permit that we received, are we gonna get?
I can attempt to answer the question. So yes, I think there's no downside in us, participating in communication with the regional board on a regional level. At this point, we're clearly on their radar. We've got a permit. There's, that's issued. It's not gonna get worse than this, one wouldn't think. As far as a partnership opportunity with the Atascadero, we've had some, conceptual discussions with the city. We've indicated that, one, they thought that because of our location, that our TDS limits might be significantly better, more favorable than what's been applied in Atascadero. As we see here today, that is not the case at all. Our limits are lower, and so therefore there's no advantage as it stands right now to Atascadero wishing to discharge their water here. The limits of 500 TDS are lower than what they're facing. As far as us partnering with them as far for a treatment facility, and sending our water to Atascadero, we've indicated that, hey, we should look at all the options. However, at the end of the day, we need our water back.
Yes.
Because we percolate this water for downstream use as drinking water, right? And so we need our water back, and percolating it at the Atascadero location doesn't provide us those same benefits. So they've committed to evaluating that in sort of a big picture way, and we've committed to kind of continuing to share the story. But I think as we sit here today, based on the permit that you just reviewed, their interest in Templeton is probably far reduced. The advantage we offered was potentially higher TDS effluent discharge limits. That's no longer the case.
Okay.
A Atascadero situation too has largely to do with their lack of capacity. They're looking to build a larger treatment plant, go away from ponds and build an activated sludge treatment plant that increases their capacity. The current wastewater pond system is it's at its maximum.
Yeah,
And I know they have
before
issues.
the changes, they already were looking at. That's great.
I know they have quite a bit of issue as well with salt, and they kind of, they were thinking of doing an RO system, but I guess working with the board, they kind of have now they've been told they don't have to do the RO system, so, but they have problems with salt as well, so.
We still have capacity. Part of this permit doesn't, we don't necessarily, they had a pre-existing issue before they were issued their new permit that the board adopted, Regional Water Control Board adopted in 2020. Right, they had a pre-existing through the master plans of 2014. It was realized then that they were at max capacity of their wastewater treatment plant. And so then I think that may be one of the largest issues in them moving forward, is trying to get that capacity, that increased capacity is driving this, not necessarily, I mean, it's coupled, it makes it more complicated, right? But they need capacity.
I mean, is there anything we could do? I mean, for us, is there anything we could do where improve the Selby ponds where we could bring in more Nasi water? And I know we actually try and take the Nasi water away, but if we
I think there are some concepts.
Would it be cheaper?
Well, I think there are concepts that would improve the percolation rates at Selby. Keep in mind, it's still a regulated facility, so we have a limit of how much water we can percolate there. Two, there's times of the year where we cannot discharge, although this permit has changed those parameters a little bit. But we know that when we're in high groundwater conditions, basically the percolation really diminishes.
Yeah, the Selby location is a part of the issue.
Yeah.
With percolation. This isn't working.
Yeah.
Love it too.
I have just one more thought. With the testing, would it be a prudent exercise to maybe for 1 month, do some independent testing in the morning, in the evenings, just figuring out what test, time of day, time of month, the levels are better? And I'm not saying we want to fake data, But I know things change throughout the year and I don't know how, I don't know if this is even makes sense. But maybe you're like, hey, if we, early in the month, in the morning, our levels are a lot better. So when we run those tests, we do it at a time that's beneficial to the community as a whole. Just a thought. I'm not saying that we want to have clean water. That's really, really important. But it's just an exercise that maybe for 1 month or 2 months, it might make sense to do a weekly test or a bi-weekly test or something. Just to see, hey, we ran tests for 2 months straight and we find out that during this window, we have the best levels and it would be the best time to run our test. Just a thought.
I have one other comment about the fees where it indicates that, Templeton, was underpaying for the last 10 years. So have we validated that that is a actual fact? Because it seems like if our wastewater was going to pass, so that we weren't being undercharged or underbilled.
Yeah, going back to almost now, it's been 3 years ago when we were issued a notice to comply, a notice of intent to comply with the general permit. They communicated that originally, all these years, we were rated as I'm gonna say something like a C3 kind of rating. As a part of this new general permit and reevaluating the wastewater treatment plant, it was reevaluated. Its risk, its proximity maybe to the Paso Robles Creek, Salinas River, those sorts of things, type and sophistication of the treatment plant, mechanical aeration equipment, those sorts of things are all kind of, assessed. And we were now receiving a rating of something like a B2, which unfortunately, increased our costs significantly.
Retroactively, 10 years back?
No, it didn't, they didn't go back in time and retroactively apply those costs, but moving forward.
Moving forward, so they're not retroactively going back 10 years. Okay, then I misread this. Okay, all right. All right, well, thank you for that update. Anything else before we move on? We've kind of spent a whole hour on this topic.
I think it's
I thought it
important.
might
I
be-
think it's important. I guess one more question. Besides this general permit, what other state or other water permits do we have? Because this is more of an effluent style permit, wastewater, but what about other permits? Is this the only one we need with the state as far as water's concerned? Or does this have any impact on any other permits that we may need? And is it, are we looking at the picture as a whole between them? Because maybe there's another permit where we have some challenges and 2 birds, 1 stone, or, I don't know. I just was curious.
We do have permits for our water, what we discharge or what we pump out of our aquifers. So we have a deep aquifer limit, but it's not necessarily the Department of Drinking Water is a different agency.
Sure.
Within the state that has different requirements for.
Do they talk to each other? Do they have any impact on each other? I just curious.
Not necessarily, but obviously the effluent, if it's going to be mixing with this water that we're eventually pumping up into our wells.
Got a long way to
It
go,
will
but yeah.
affect
Sure.
what those constituents are on the other end.
Sure.
So if, the limits and reducing these limits will only improve our water quality,
Yeah.
in the wells later on. But, could lend to, and Department of Drinking Water might require different constituent levels where we have to treat the water later on.
Sure.
So with our new project on the Creekside site, the Nacimiento turnout relocation, we actually do have treatment planned, and it's actually the first treatment that Templeton has looked into, because in previous years we have met the constituent limits. But now with this new change and anticipation of possibly more stringent constituent limits, we are providing an area to treat water on that Creekside site. But the goal is, because we're bringing in Nacimiento water and it'll be raw water from a surface body, not groundwater, that will help offset, and we can lean on that more to meet our requirements in the future. So we don't just have groundwater that could possibly have higher levels, that we also have the surface water
And-
um,
And as far as
option as well.
conveyance is concerned, because I know water conveyance is a tricky thing. Does Templeton have the ability to convey water between all of its sites? Move water, you got this site, this well, that well, because to your point, if we're having an issue with the groundwater being high, but we plant.
Can I ask that we take that offline, because
Sure.
this topic is just the update on the permit,
Okay.
so if there's
Yeah, I'm
questions.
happy to talk
That's-
to you
that-
after,
that's
that'd be
fine.
And I think, Eric, you sound like you've got a lot of water knowledge, and it
My-
sounds like you might be good to have a discussion with Justin and Lori
Yes,
I
do.
to kind of get you
The
familiar
system-
with
the
what we
system
have
is
here in
interesting, so
Templeton.
we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah,
And
no,
I think it
absolutely.
would be good for you to do a site visit.
Absolutely, and I don't wanna waste time, and I do, my dad, actually, I'm gonna go visit a site called Forest Ranch, which is a huge underground water storage facility, so my father does a lot of stuff with water and
No,
brokerage.
no,
in the
and I
States.
think that's a welcomed to this committee.
Absolutely,
So I
I'll get with
appreciate
Justin
that.
and,
But
Lori,
yeah, I just wanna make sure
whatever.
that we move on through all of our
Absolutely,
topics.
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so anything else, general manager, that you wanna add to this, or Eileen, before we close out this topic? It sounds like what
No,
we've
I'm
got is to
sure-
respond, we've got a response to the water board. It sounds like we've got some challenges that Justin, you and Lori, I'm assuming are working on, and with Eileen to get resolved. But I think that this is gonna be a topic that is gonna be on the agenda in the future.
It will be,
It will be.
undoubtedly.
So, okay, more to come then.
I gotta, no, I'm just kidding.
Don't do that to me, Eric. All right, so let's move on then to the third agenda item, the water sewer unit payment plan provision and code requirement. Do we
And
need
thank- and
Eileen for
thank-
this?
No, and thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Okay,
Okay,
so on this particular item.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring a couple of, if you don't mind,
Okay.
bring something up right off that. It won't let me right now.
It's being a little bit glitchy, like.
Yeah, thanks, Gary.
I
Okay,
printed it
so
just in case, but.
It is, okay.
You know why? Because it needs a mouse pad.
Even on my mouse pad, it was still.
Oh, really?
I was having a hard time getting
So,
into it.
Do you know if I can make this much bigger?
I don't see anything.
Right next to show changes, there's a little,
Where do you see show changes?
up on the
Oh,
upper
above.
right.
All the way to the
there's a
right. Yeah.
Zoom, there's a magnifying glass.
Oh, I see right there.
Yeah, see if that does anything.
That's search.
Oh, that's search.
Yeah, that
Oh,
doesn't
sorry.
do it, and the more doesn't have it either.
Okay.
There's nothing to enlarge it.
I don't have very good vision, and so that is not
You
sort
wanna,
of,
you wanna.
a bit
do
of a
it off
non-starter
my-
for me.
You wanna do it off my laptop?
let me see. I can do it off, well, but I'm not sure I could bring this, I can like talk to this
Yeah, I printed it, I'll just give you the print.
in general, nothing to.
Is this an updated,
No.
This is the
It's the existing code. I'm
okay,
just trying to bring something up to kind of walk you through this, but let me start with some background, and back up a lot. And say that the code that we're working with has been written under the assumption that we have a water wait list, right? Because we've had one for like decades, more than 30 years. Templeton's had a water wait list. And then earlier, about the end of last year, we essentially exhausted the wait list. We enough new units were made available that we water unit offers to all the parties on the wait list, to the point where there was no longer a wait list, and there remains units available. Right now, I believe 276, and perhaps a few more coming. We have a relinquishment that's pending. I thought it's important for the committee, this is something that came up at a board meeting, I believe in February, that the committee kind of review what the requirements are in the code and determine whether or not you wish to keep things operating the way they are. Keep in mind, the code has been operating under this waitlist assumption for decades. What the, what the code requires under, under section, really section 14.08, 470 and 480. And see that here.
There's a long section.
Okay.
Oh, you're trying to do it off your phone?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I copied it all. I plug it into ChatGPT and have it give me some highlights, so.
Oh, okay.
Anyhow, 14.08, 470. What this kind of said, what the way the code reads in our interpretation is right now, let's say you are you own a vacant piece of land and you want to proceed with a project. That it's when you apply for, really we call a will serve letter, the code says you must make a deposit on a recordable agreement for the project. And so, and this is how we've been dealing with these waitlist applicants. Historically, persons have essentially put their property on the wait list, again, over a 3 or plus decade period. When we got to their spot on the wait list, we said, hey, you're on the wait list for 10 water units. We have 10 available. Do you want them? They've said, most of them have said no. Some have said yes. Some have said, well, I don't want 10, but I want 2. And so the process has been to enter into a 5-year payment plan agreement with those parties. And then during that payment plan agreement, there's I'll call it performance period. It's outlined in the code. They have to, with a certain amount of time, make an application to the county, and they have to make sure that application gets fully satisfied or becomes complete. And then they have to sort of see it through during the 5-year period. If the application is still pending at the end of the 5 years, well, by then it's paid off and whatever happens, happens. But during the 5-year window, if the application falls through, or they change their mind, which a lot of them have in the last few years, they've just said, this is too hard, or I can't do what I thought I could do. So I just want to cancel the agreement.
Sure.
That has happened.
Do they
And then
receive a deposit on that?
Well, they get their money back, essentially. There's a processing fee, but they get their money back on the agreement.
Mhm.
The anticipation is now that we're in a position where water isn't necessarily constrained. I mean, there is a constraint. It's not unlimited, but there's enough available for the foreseeable future that we can probably meet the application. Does the code requiring the payment plan or the deposit still make sense? Or in the alternate, should we consider amending the code to deal with these sort of over the counter? And again, in some cases, we wanted to talk about the pros and cons of each with the committee. Right now, it says you have to enter into a payment plan agreement, but if a party waited, like let's say you're John Doe and you have a vacant lot right here, and you don't apply for a will serve letter immediately, you start your application process with the county. You want to build a fourplex, as an example. The county eventually is going to say, well, we need some sort of will serve letter from the district that says that we're prepared to provide you water. Up until the end of last year, we wouldn't have provided that unless the party was in a payment plan agreement or already had a water unit assigned to the parcel or enough units to meet the project. Now, I think we would issue what I'll call an intent to serve letter. It says, yes, we have units, they have to be paid for, but we can serve this project if it gets approved. Then at the time, the party could, under the way the code reads now, they could say, well, I want to lock that price in that you have now, and I want to enter into a 5-year payment plan agreement now, ahead of the county's process, and start making payments on the water units. They could do so today under the 5-year payment plan agreement, or I believe they could just request this intent to serve letter, allow the county process to go all the way to the point of building permit. Then come to us and say, okay, now I need a will serve letter. We would then enter into the same 5-year payment plan agreement and say, well, you have to have it paid off before we actually issue the will serve letter. You can't set the meter itself until it's fully paid in full. And so essentially the 5 years becomes a few months or whatever, because they can't wait, if they're ready to pull a building permit, the construction isn't gonna take 5 years. So, the way the code reads is the instrument still needs to be utilized in order to process this permit unless it's gonna be paid off in full instantaneously. In other words, it's no longer a discretionary, they're ready to pull a building permit. There's no more hiccups along the way in which they pay it off. In all other places, in general, there's not this much process involved, right? Like normally, if you're the city of Paso Robles and you own a piece of property, you apply to the planning department, and when you're ready to pull your building permit, all of your fees will be tabulated. One of which will be called like a water connection fee or water capacity fee or water impact fee, whatever you want to call it. And those are all paid with some exceptions at the time you pull your building permit. Our code really didn't anticipate this ever happening. It's all structured around this wait list concept. So we wanted to solicit the committee's, opinion about does it work the way, does the code work the way you envision this working? Because right now it still requires kind of a heavy amount of processing. Application for coming in, starting the payment plan provisions. By the way, these are not simple, right? This is a document that's got to be notarized on both parties. It's recorded with the county. It's a fair amount of effort to get these put in place. And then in a lot of cases, they have to be amended because what starts out being 5 water units becomes 4 and then maybe even 3. We've had some over the last couple of years have multiple amendments. Same process. Signatures notarized, a recording fee with the county. It takes actually months to get each one completed because they go to the county because sometimes they fail for some reason and we got to start over. And so it's kind of a laborious process. The advantage, if there is an advantage, it's because it allows the purchasing party to kind of lock in their price, although they have to start then locking up some cash to take advantage of that, as opposed to an over-the-counter transaction.
So I'm assuming that each time that agreement is amended, we're charging an administrative fee
We
for
are
our
not.
staff, so we're not.
No.
So our,
Well,
so our
when there's
staff,
an
we go
amendment,
through
I'll tell you
that.
what, we are and we are not. So there's no fee, there's no administrative fee to initiate the program. It's just the payment of let's call it the water unit fee. There is a administrative fee for relinquishing or under this agreement, it's called forfeiture. So if John Doe comes in, came in last year, bought 5 water units that were on the wait list, and now they come back to us and they go, I can't build 5 units, I can only build 4, I want to amend my agreement. We charge $500 to essentially forfeit that water unit. And in that process, we recorded an amendment to the agreement to reflect that, and then they keep making payments, and that might happen again. I think in one case, like LaSalle, we've done 2 amendments on one purchase.
So it would seem to me that we should charge an administrative fee, because it's staff time to make that change. So if you're coming in and you're saying, this is what I want.
But I think conversation is if we eliminate the whole payment plan, then we don't even have to worry about this.
I actually agree with.
Well, but I don't know that we've come to the conclusion that we eliminate that. So it's a matter of, what I'm looking at is currently is if we've got amendments being made, because even if we come up with one agreement and they pay the full amount up front, if they come back and say, I want to change the number of water units, there's still processing that has to occur with the county.
I don't think
Correct?
that happens
So-
anyway.
Well, we're in this sort of interim period where we've got a whole bunch of 5-year payment plan agreements that are in the middle of,
Yeah.
somewhere in the first 5 years because they were offered off the wait list. When we were on the wait list, we really had no choice but to do this because nobody could have been prepared with their project in time to meet that 30 or 45 day window. So short, right?
Yeah.
They had to make good. So that's what this process permitted. Now that if we believe we're done with that for the foreseeable future, I believe we are. We have, let's say rough numbers, 300 water units. That's like 20 years of growth at the past 10-year rate or more. If you wait and collect only at the end, like we do for all the other
Yeah.
fees, then this is an over-the-counter transaction that happens just once. So, well, it would still be a two-step process. The party would have to come in, request what I'll call an intent to serve letter. We would inform the county that yes, the water units are available, they have to be paid for, but they're available and they're immediate, you know, they're in the district essentially, they can tie into a water main. That we would provide that letter to the applicant, they would go through the entitlement process. And when they're ready to get a building permit, they would come in and apply for a will serve letter. And that, when we would tabulate all the costs, including their parks and recreation fee, their fire impact fee, their sewer connection fee, their water connection fee, and they would be a single transaction, and then they would take the will serve letter.
And with that scenario, they're not likely gonna come back and change the number of water units.
At that point, they're building the,
Because they've
Yeah,
already
they-
been through
they
the
may
county.
need to come back to get a revised intent to serve if something
Yeah,
happens.
but at that
in the
point, they've
process.
already gone through the whole process.
Yeah, and that would just be an application fee to update the letter. But
Yeah.
it wouldn't involve any sort of refunds. That's
Yeah.
what's happening now is that they're paying either for the payment plan a portion
Yeah,
of those units. And so if they say, oh, I don't want that unit anymore, then we either have to refund what they've already
Yeah.
paid. So there's
apply credit to the next
finance
payment.
Yeah.
all,
It's a
we
fee.
have
So,
a
yeah.
pending agreement, so I have Tasha helping me with those and get, recording with the county, so there's all these steps that kind
so
of
that needs to be
affect the
eliminated.
payment plan.
So there's not much we can do about it for the next 4 or so years because they're already in place.
Yeah,
Right, we
yeah, but
were
it's really
issued-
going forward.
But going forward, right now, the way the code reads, it doesn't really allow for this sort of over-the-counter transaction. It says a deposit must be made in a recordable agreement. And so there isn't this, the code was never set up to be able to provide essentially an over-the-counter transaction. It's this much more complicated process. And so I think the question for the committee is, does it make sense in your mind to maintain the option of a payment plan agreement? Or should this just become just an over-the-counter transaction, fees paid essentially at the time of connection and not this sort of tracking, again, ignoring what we've done for 30 years because there's no getting around that. But from this point going forward, if a party comes in now that does not yet have a water unit, can we issue an intent to serve letter and then follow that up with a will serve application and a fee paid all at once with no payment plan agreement? And if that's what you desire, then I think we need to work with our legal counsel to revise the code so that it works without, it works in a more normal fashion. The code doesn't require these payment plan agreements.
Yeah, I did, some chat GBTing and some thoughts on this, and, I do agree if there are changes administratively that they should be charged for them. That being said, if you do remove this, which I strongly believe you should, and that's my position, I believe that it should be, if you want a will serve letter, there's a certain document fill out, you have to pay for the money for the time for us to put it together. That document would say, this is just saying we do agree there's units available. They will not be provided until, entire payment is fulfilled. Then, once they put in the application, they get approved. Obviously they need to, you guys go through, do all the math, pay it all up, one lump sum, no more payment plans. I think if you're building something, you just have to figure out how to come up with the money. And so that's my position. I believe you just eliminate all that. You get 2 options. You can say, yep, we have units available. If you want one, you apply and you pay. And then when you pay, you get the connection. I have some questions with that though. Obviously, in order to make the connections, there's, demolition of the asphalt and the excavation. There's the hot tap or the outage has to occur to tie into it. There's the sewer tie-in, which that's pretty easy. Usually you can do that with some sort of like hot tap type device. Where is the CSD or the county's responsibility in that, and where's the construction team's responsibility in that? Or that part of the fees, right? Because obviously if you're opening up the street and making a connection and then patching it, what does that look like?
That's all
It's
on the
all-
developer.
It's all on the developer, and then obviously there's inspections, but that's gonna be by the county.
No,
The
that's with both. in that case.
inspection, we do have an inspection fee, involved in those fees that we were talking about. I can provide you
Yeah,
our
yeah.
example fees so that you can get an idea, but we do have that. And then for larger developments, like we have a track that's going to be starting soon, and a ranch that is based on, it's a cost estimate, and we take a 5% from that to do our inspections
Sure.
for the overall track.
And with,
And then we're actually accepting the water line for that track. So it's based on, what's the agreement, who's gonna be doing the operations and maintenance of the ultimate.
and that's not part of the
lines.
meter.
That's different than this. This
Okay.
is like basically you have water and
Different fee.
sewer
Yeah.
along your frontage,
Yeah, yeah.
and you're just, if it was like simply you wanted to make a connection or a couple connections to, there was already mains in front of the property, then they would just be responsible for those laterals
And then,
and coordinating with the county on all the permits and
Design
encroachment
details,
permits and
standards.
whatever they're requiring for feedback.
yeah,
So there's a partnership between the county and yourselves when these things go in and overseeing the inspection.
no, that's perfect. I just wanted to understand that. Okay, and this is a different conversation, but
So that's on top of all of these other fees. So
Sure.
when we're thinking about, what people are ultimately paying when they're coming in and saying, I want a water connection, I'm very clear with them. We are not going to be the ones
we'll hand you the
actually
meter.
doing that connection for you. So you need to talk to contractors to also get those additional
Yeah,
amounts so
You'll-
that you fully understand what it's gonna cost.
you'll
you.
hand them the meter though, correct?
We
We'll install a
we
meter.
install the meter.
Okay,
So that's the one thing we do, and they go ahead and set the box, and then when they're ready, we coordinate with them. There's basically a work order form that they come fill out, and we go.
and that's in
go
the
ahead and
fee.
do that.
There's a separate fee for a meter install.
Okay, but
So what we're talking about, the fees that I'm addressing here are really the water capacity fee that's subject to 5-year payment plan. All the other fees are one-time
Outside of
fees,
it.
not part of this.
post-construction.
Well,
Yeah, or
they're-
pre-connection,
At
but
will serve issuance, we collect those fees, and then they take that letter and they go pull their permit. with the
Sure.
County.
Okay,
So they're paying our fees and the county's fees, and then going ahead and starting
Just-
construction.
just for funsies, what is a 1-unit fee? I'm gonna found a property, I'm gonna build a house, besides the construction cost and the inspection fees and all that stuff. Just to say, yep, we agree, we're gonna give you a meter, what is that dollar amount?
about 45,000 for a water.
Okay.
40s.
I'm sorry, I know that we got a lot to go through and, I can talk to Justin offline. So, okay, my position
I
is,
wanna send you the whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I have a summary of
Yeah.
all the fees, that
Yeah.
it'll give you an idea, a snapshot, and what I've been giving to people, and they find it really helpful because it helps them understand.
Right.
Here's what I'm looking like for development fees just for TCSD, and I recommend they get that same thing for the county. And then there's a school fee, there's a lot of fees that people have to deal with in Templeton. And
yeah,
it's becoming a little bit frustrating for folks. So
Yeah.
as Jeff was mentioning, there have been people that are like, we just can't do it, and they come back to us later on and say, you know what, this isn't working out, I now want to get a really, a refund. And so we're trying to figure out how that works for us and
Mhm.
how, like you were saying, we should have an admin fee if we're gonna be processing these things
But-
later on. Or if it's just like, if we just provided them a letter and then we didn't take any payment, then it wouldn't, in that case, we'd be like, okay, well, this letter basically is, no longer applies because either they pulled the permit from the county and now it's gone, or they have a different idea they wanna go with, and then we'd have to supersede that letter.
So going back to, kind of, should we have this installment plan? I would say it sounds like it's just a administrative burden.
yes.
And so anything we can do to streamline our operations, will help reduce our costs.
And it helps with cash flow, because now you're not waiting on money. You're
Well,
getting it.
yeah, but I mean, and so I would be in favor of making some revisions, where this just, as you recommended, an over the counter transaction.
Okay, if it's acceptable to the committee, then we'll work with our legal counsel to draft an ordinance that revise this to eliminate the requirement of entering into a payment plan provision. And am I hearing you correct? You don't want to even offer that as an option, right? We want to
Are
be
you
kind
in
of,
favor of that, as well, Nikki? Okay, yeah, I don't think so. I think, the payment plan, I think, was something we did, because of the wait list and, so I would say no. Because I think it's also, if they're ready to build, they're ready to build. They have all the funds available.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is if we got rid of the payment plan provision and we just was an over the counter, we would be much more like everywhere else.
Yeah, well, and also the payment plan, then you've got to also administer that.
Yeah, it's
So
a
I'm
burden.
looking for whatever reduces our administrative cost as much as possible. And
Yeah,
that would
it's
be
a,
the one
it's
to
a
decline.
hassle.
Yeah.
It's a hassle. Even for the party that wants, even for the party that is in one, they say, well, I'm giving up. I wanna, now we've gotta go through this process of sort of undoing this or amending the agreement and, it takes, we can't just, it's not something to get dealt with in a single day.
The only thing I would speak to, I agree, it should cost what it costs. Is Templeton pro-development, like, we want people to build here, you wanna continue growth in Templeton? Do you guys have a general plan or an idea of like what you guys wanna do? Because, I don't know if $45,000 is, to me, it seems like a lot because I've done water and meters and things for schools and other type of things, and that's a hefty price tag.
We're
And
on the high
I think we've already gone through that and justified the cost because it's really looking at what's our. The way I kind of think of it is somebody who's living here and paying their property taxes and paying the bill are kind of paying into what's needed in future infrastructure. Someone that comes in and just builds hasn't really put in any kind of investment into the future and the needs in the future. And that's why these fees are as high as they are.
I mean, we had, the board adopted a philosophy at one point that says new development has to pay its own way. And that's what led to the establishment of the fee.
Okay.
But the fee is justified based on the cost of the improvements.
And I'm not saying it's not, and this is a different conversation for a different time, I just wanna get an
Yeah, and
idea.
that actually is tied to the master plan effort, and then we also do like an impact fee study following the master plan
Sure.
effort, because all those fees are connected with actual projects.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely.
So those development fees are connected in that way, and I'm happy to show you.
Yeah, no,
where we got there.
Cause I'm looking right now, I rent, looking to buy or build of some sort of home. Might move to Paso Robles, but being a construction guy, just my background, I run big construction projects, build schools. I work for Electric now doing electrical work, but I built the entire Guadalupe Junior High School, right? So I want to build a home, and so I start looking at property and what that looks like, and start doing
So
the
you
math.
should call me.
Yeah.
Lori will tell you.
Well, I'm a ways out from that thing, but to that
Yeah.
point, I'm trying to, look at, cost analysis of what that would look like
Yeah.
and how that
Yeah,
makes
and-
sense.
To keep you with that dream where you might just throw the dream away.
Well, my
yeah,
parents built
I
2
mean-
homes, and I can do a lot of the work myself. That being said,
It's the fees, though. It has nothing to do
fees.
with how much it costs to actually
I
build.
understand.
That's the challenge I'm getting from a lot of people,
But-
and then that's what we're trying to figure out here.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring us back.
Yep, that's fine.
So we've got, I think consensus to move forward with,
Yes, and then-
working with legal to, make the necessary revisions to the code.
And then that would come to the board
Board.
unless there's some surprise or something, there's some reason we have to come back.
And to confirm, anyone on a payment plan before their meter gets installed does have to pay in full.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I just want to confirm that, because
Yeah,
if it wasn't, that should be expressed, so people are making payments, but if they want to build, they
Yeah,
gotta pay.
that's actually built into the payment plan.
Okay.
So after they pay it off, and then the payment plan goes away and they get their meter.
Yeah,
Okay, so let's move on to item number 4, the PFAS update.
Okay,
Justin?
brief with the limited amount of time that we have.
Well, I know this
I'll
came
go
before
quick.
the board. This already came before the board.
That's correct.
And the board was made aware of this. So, any update now?
Yeah, at that time, we still had a few samples that were out being tested through the EPA's lab, and we received those results. And so I just wanted to update you that the well that we had, the notification exceedance at Creekside River, it tested positive for 2 different compounds. And so one of those compounds was found to be non-detect from the December sampling. And one of those, the compound specifically that we had the exceedance, the notification exceedance, was half as much as we had realized back in June. So they were better. Smith well was the other well that we had tested. It's our largest shallow river well, and so it was non-detect on all of the various PFAS compounds. Again, I just want to let you know about that.
Okay,
You know, we are still including in our CCR, our Consumer Confidence Report, verbiage, language, talking about PFAS compounds and health effects and what we did realize as far as, you know, results through this last 2025 year. And so those will be found in the 2025 Consumer Confidence Report. The only other thing is that we're still continuing to work with DDW and looking at in future requirements, testings. A lot of what we sampled through the EPA, I think is applicable. We're gonna be able to use those with other regulatory requirements moving forward. I don't have an update, and I will certainly bring that update before you all, you know, when it's been made available. But I wanted to let you know about the results we received from December.
thank you.
Just real quick, quick question. What do you think happened, going from June to now? And limits
The wind
dropped?
change.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so subjective. I mean,
Did we get some early rains?
We did.
Well, there, you know, from June to one of the, maybe the largest influences may have been receiving wet weather in December versus June and July. And so, but it's hard to say. We've only had those two times at each facility that we've sampled for these compounds. For the most part, non-detect is what we've realized, but we had a couple of.
I think I think it's fair to expect there to be some variability in the results. We get that with all of our sampling, and
Yeah.
that the mixture of the water, particularly in shallow wells, is subject to change, right? Like under really dry periods, you're probably seeing a lot more wastewater effluent at those wells from both Atascadero and from us, in terms of what's at those locations.
Well, at least the results went favorable, so I'm good with that.
Yeah, it's good news.
All right, well, let's move on to item number 5, the cross-connection control program update.
I will again try and be quick with this one. So last year, spring, we prepared an update about requirements for cross-connection control programs by water purveyors. And so then this was statewide requirements for preparing a plan to meet and be in compliance, meet the water board's requirements, and then to start moving forward with that program. And it's somewhat complicated. It's still sort of, we're still kind of, it's still in motion. It's still very fluid right now. But I wanted to provide you with an update. There are some things that we're looking to move forward on. And so it will be a part of our budget. So I want to run through this real quick with you all, and then look for updates ongoing. Okay, so, you know, so the state water board was looking to protect public health, and you'll see in terms of the potable water system and certain contaminants coming in via vacuum pressure, things connecting to our water distribution system that could contaminate the water. And so then the apparatus usually used to try and protect the drinking water in the potable water system is a backflow device. And you'll see through these very few slides to go through, but you'll see backflow devices used. I have snapshots of different types of backflows through these slides. Just trying to point out, for the most part, this has to do with backflow protection of the potable water system. And so then it dealt with a new policy handbook. This policy handbook replaced Title 17 of the existing state code. And so then that no longer applies. It required certification standards for testers, specialists, hazard assessments were going to be required. I wanted to make a special note here that in this compliance and these new requirements, there's no financial assistance necessarily afforded to the water purveyors necessarily. this is a whole new requirement and, you know, we're gonna try and get through the hazard assessments and so some of these, some of the program stipulations, get through it, as best as we can with the resources we have. We may be leaning very hard on less intense labor, initiatives like, or tactics like, surveys and questionnaires rather than, and try and get as much data as we can without going on site to some of these premises. But we, the district, provided and were approved June of 2025. We, our cross-connection control plan was approved by the DDW. And then, so like I said, we're still in the initial stages and ongoing development of our program. Compliance in the program had to do with these following elements. Hazard assessments. Those continue to be something that water purveyors are strategizing about how to do them, how to comply with the new policy handbook, and you know, not exhaust the staff or gain new staff to try and, you know, with existing funds and resources, try and make good. So their legal authorities mentioned backflow inspection testing. There's a number of different elements that make up, you know, the program and its in total. Hazard assessments. I wanted to point out that we currently contract with San Luis Obispo County. Matthew Gifrida is our liaison with the county. He's our coordinator specialist with the county. And so then when we're talking about formulating our program, talking about implementing it, we're working with him as our advisor, as our coordinator and our specialist. We are also working with a number of other water purveyors all around us to gain insight into what they're being successful with and how they're trying to comply with this kind of unfunded, you know, requirements for backflow protection and cross-connection control protection. So, you know, we're looking to do residential questionnaires, commercial properties. They're noted later. We'll get in here. They're actually there's a list the state provided of commercial type, industrial type users accounts, and those they're requiring backflows. Those types of businesses are going to be required to install backflows, and they're looking for the water purveyor, you know, in the jurisdiction to take the lead on that, to make sure that that happens. Legal authority. So the district already has a really robust, as we just went over a moment ago, robust water code. There are very minor revisions, omitting the reference to Title 17. And then now realizing that the cross-connection control policy handbook is what we're going by. Largely though, our water code already provided for backflow protection and legal authority and those sorts of.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been instituting the requirement on the commercial properties for some time now.
That's right.
Backflow.
That's right. So the hazard assessments that we're talking about doing for residential, we have 2,600 approximately to issue, and on-site inspections, you know, up to 310. I want to say that to the greatest extent possible, we're going to be looking at using surveys and questionnaires to be able to gain insight into what they have in their premises. It's not perfect right now. Matthew and I were even just speaking this morning, and it's understood we may receive very few responses by residents and or commercial accounts. And so
So how, is this gonna be mailed out separately from the water bill?
Well, so as far as how we're gonna send out that questionnaire through the mail or electronic, we have some users that receive their bills electronically as well. We're still working with on that, but this is an example. I wanted to provide kind of an example of what one would find. I'm not sure if it's necessarily separate document, if it would be mailed out separately or in with their bill. Those that receive a hard copy in with their bill with an enclosed envelope mailed back, or everybody's gonna go to an electronic version to try and fill it out. We're still working through those
Try
sort
to
of.
give as many options as possible.
Yeah, I think that would help, but I would also think that there would need to be some kind of cover letter to explain.
Yes, it
what
will.
the-
It absolutely
The
will.
survey is about.
Yes,
For residents, I mean,
great point.
why, for what, when are they required to have this backflow? Or like, what, you know, you have a lot of things here, written down. What do you need to have on your property to require for you to have this backflow?
Yeah, so once we're working hand in hand with our specialists, our coordinator, county staff. So when we are receiving these questionnaires back, we'll be going through hand in hand with the county and identifying if there was a trigger that requires. So
what
For
triggers it?
example,
Having a lawn irrigation system?
Yeah, no, it's gonna,
Yes.
our code requires if somebody has their own private well on their site,
yeah,
that their district water connection has to have a backflow on it. That's in the code today.
So typically backflow preventers, from the construction that I've done on commercial buildings, we will install a backflow preventer for the fire suppression specific systems specifically. And we'll install a backflow preventer to any irrigation type systems. That way the water for either of those systems don't make it back into the main water supply.
Yeah.
Typically, we don't do it for the potable water inside the building. Now it might be required depending on if the building has something, but it's any time that any sort of contaminants can get back into the main water supply, which irrigation, the fire suppression system, because those pipes, the water is really nasty, like the black pipe or whatever it is. So, my guess is like my house, I have a sprinkler system and a lawn irrigation system, though minor, I would guess that would require some sort of backflow preventer.
Not
Not,
necessarily.
well, that would be the only reason.
It's a different water source, so,
So you're gonna be
so if there's a
looking at-
well, you.
So,
Yeah, I mean, you guys are trying to stop contaminating
Because
water.
we're
from potable water.
providing the irrigation water.
Yeah.
yeah.
Going back
if
to
you-
Naviv's question.
So I mean, if you're asking all of these, I mean, I think it kind of, like, if I would get this, I'm all, whoa, it's asking about lawn irrigation, drip irrigation. I'm all, well, I don't know if I wanna answer this, it's kind of becomes like.
We were just.
That's what I told Tristan last night. We need to, this is a draft for you. We would need to explain which of these items are potentially gonna cause an issue and what are we required to obtain? Because, I don't know that I care if you have a drip system or not. I shouldn't say that. I know I don't care if you have a drip system or not. I don't know if we're required to maintain that record or to care if you have a drip system.
Water storage tank, and then, I
But
mean,
the
even if it's
concept
a
is-
private well, in and
Well, I
out
think
of
that's where
use.
the cover letter is gonna be critical,
It
because
is.
the cover letter
Yes.
has gotta explain why you're doing this, and so that there isn't this fear of, well, do I disclose this? For fear that it may have, should be not allowed and it'll be shut down, or it may cost me money.
Oh, yeah.
So I
Yeah,
think
are
that
there-
that cover letter is gonna be very critical in terms of
Yes.
how you get people to
Are
respond.
there fines
The other-
associated, things like that?
Well, yeah, cause people are gonna be a little suspect. And I noticed that you've got up here the total, so these are the total number of survey responses that you are expecting back. Cause my question is what happens if you don't get a response back?
Yeah, and we're still, great question. So just even this morning, I was talking to our specialist coordinator and with the understanding, we're not gonna be able to get everybody. We're not gonna be able to get, I mean, if we were to get a third of our constituents, maybe that would be something, really.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, that's why I'm asking, is there any
Yeah.
follow-up that takes place?
there is going to be, but those next steps haven't been identified, but with.
And we have many years to make good on this. That's
Okay.
the person that says, this isn't a deadline that's coming in 6 months.
Yeah.
We've kind of committed to like, hey, this is gonna take us 5 or 10 years to get all this
In
data.
our plan, we submitted, it was 5 years.
Yeah,
is
so-
what- Yeah,
So we know that, look, okay, so let's say at the end of 5 years, there's still 1,000 customers that didn't respond. I think working with, at that point, we'll know what kind of level of enforcement is there. Do we now need to go to those addresses and assist them
Or
and fill
use
this out?
GPS.
Or we're good, yeah, hey, we got 80% compliance, we're happy with that. You know, where does that, because I don't think, I think it'd be very naive for us to assume that
Yeah.
everybody will voluntarily submit the
No,
information.
I don't think that's gonna happen, for just a variety of reasons. I mean, just realistically, you're not gonna get 100% response.
Right.
So it's, the question is what's your response rate that you're looking for that's acceptable?
Yeah.
And, you know, if you don't achieve that, then what's your process for trying to increase it?
Yeah, I'm hoping that it doesn't require then us to visit those properties in person. Cause we're really trying to limit the amount of instances where we have to perform on-site inspections in coordination with the county.
I think when we look at the higher risk locations, the commercial accounts, the industrial accounts, those are ones that we probably aren't gonna be able to simply walk away from. When
Yeah.
you deal with like industrial applications where they pressurize water and other things, much higher risk of this contamination of the water system happening. And so we'll have a duty to ensure that those places do have, you know, proper backflow prevention devices. And Justin included attached a list of the types of businesses that are most likely to create a problem.
Yeah.
Highest risk.
And just with some quick math, you don't, you know, if you didn't get compliance over 5 years, 5 days a week, if you wanted to go to each site, you would have to do 2 a day. So, you know, if you had to do it, I think, yeah, it wouldn't be too hard, you know, do your initial survey. And I think if you had a few hundred or, you know, 1,000 left or whatever, you
I think
identify
we'd
the
probably
drive.
end up looking at contracting something like that out,
Well,
because
well-
our very short, you know, small staff.
Whatever it is, it
Yeah.
would be fairly easy to take care of whatever was left over.
Well, I would say there's certain properties, certain parts of the district that would be more concerning on the
Yeah.
residential side. That would be easier to target, so there could be, you know, like a more,
As the general manager pointed out, we do have that
Indicated
high hazard identification list that was provided to us by the State Water Board. And so that was in the Appendix D, and it lists more high hazard sort of places that require on-site or backflow verification.
So you have kind of your list of priorities of who you're going to.
And we're going through our accounts and matching up who who do we have that's connected to our system? What users are identified in this list? And which ones already have a backflow and those sorts of things. So, real quick, just ending here, wanted to talk about hydrant meters, because those are also gonna be required. We're gonna be required to attach backflow devices to hydrant meters. And so it's a cost. In the past, we would purchase a backflow at around, a hydrant meter at maybe $850, $900. And so we actually had monies budgeted this year to purchase several hydrant meters. But as we were going through the requirements, we put pause on that and looked into backflow protection on those hydrant meters. And so we identified a lesser cost option. And what I mean by that is that there were options to get a hydrant meter. One sort of uniform apparatus has a hydrant meter and a backflow for over $5,000. It's one unit. We were looking at purchasing the hydrant meter and the backflow with a little stand that you see in the image, and for right around $3,000. And so it's a substantial increase from just what we would have been doing is just purchasing a hydrant meter for $850, $900. And so it's a substantial increase. This is the lesser cost option. But you know, we may not only be taking increase, we may be increasing the deposit for these devices. And then we also may be encouraging folks to connect to our system. Whereas maybe they've been issued a hydrant meter for 4 or 5, maybe more years. We may be encouraging those folks in the long term, if it's a long-term need, go ahead and connect to the potable water system, free of the hydrant meter, and you know.
We think this complicates things. We're probably gonna end up with more things like damage
Yeah,
and
sort of.
vandalism
Yeah.
accidents, but someone bumping or
Yep.
damaging it. And the hydrant meters is kind of I'll just call it kind of a hassle. These are generally it's designed for temporary water use, like water truck for a construction
Yeah.
site. But they get taken advantage of. People, let's just keep it there. Well, I might use it next month. And they drag on just to the point where we don't have any more available when somebody needs it. And it's just to mention, we have a couple that their business is construction, so it's essentially a permanent water use. We're not collecting an impact fee for the hydrant because it's gonna be a temporary use. And then we're not, so there's some challenges like that. So it might end up being some policy provisions, some fee revisions, so that one, the general ratepayers aren't subsidizing contractors essentially by having to provide these additional devices. And two, our costs are truly being covered.
I have a suggestion that I've done with a construction project. We tried to get a hydrant meter in a location. They're like, no, but we have a central location that has a meter on it that we will assign you to, and you can do that. And I don't know how it would work with multiple contractors, but maybe there's an option instead of giving them out every time someone wants a construction project, you have some sort of central location that they can fill up a water truck or a water buffalo, and you make it their problem. They're like, well, we want it closer or whatever, and because there's not always a hydrant in front of a project. So just a suggestion. Not sure how that would shake out with multiple. I think one location, actually, they just didn't charge us for the water, which I'm not saying to do that, but instead of buying one of those, now have a few on deck if you've got a big commercial project and they're right next to a hydrant, of course, whatever. But yeah, that thing's gonna, be a pain. So just a suggestion, just, you provide a
A
location.
combo of those things. having,
So it sounds like this is gonna be a future agenda item.
It is.
Because we need to make some policy changes, is what I'm hearing.
I wanted to provide an update. There's more coming, and it's.
So I would also like to add to that future agenda item, the policy changes that I think are gonna be needed, but also I would be interested in knowing what the survey's results are as well. And what kind of response rate you get on that.
Just interested on the service, that's not imminent.
Yeah,
It may be that the
But
surveys
I'm
don't go
just
out
saying is that-
until after your next meeting. But-
Provide an incentive too. Hey, if you do this, you get 5% off your next bill.
You got a comment,
Yeah.
Mindy?
Yeah, I'm just,
They're not even in.
so I'm trying
Just,
to
I'm not saying
understand
that. Piece
with
of
this
candy.
backflow, so it says medical offices or dental office with water connected equipment.
We're excluding all dentist office. I just.
No,
Where would
Is that-
yeah.
why is that-
Yeah.
Why are
It's
those?
anything that's pressurized, anything that's got an
That
independent.
thing is pressurized.
I would say all
I mean,
commercial buildings
I
need to
mean,
be.
Anything related to dental floss and
equipment's
dental
not-
equipment.
Yeah.
It's not, nothing is pressurized. It's like, we have our own, the dental equipment has its own bottle, saline solution that we put in, so there's nothing
Yeah,
is
so
pressurized that.
Well, let me give you an example. Go back to that fire hydrant meter for a second. This is the one that frustrates me, is we're gonna invest, the district's gonna have to spend $20,000-$30,000 in just getting our hydrant meters to qualify. The risk coming of how these are used locally is almost nothing. Contractors hook up a hose and they feed a water truck through a hose. The truck itself is not pressurized.
Yeah.
There's no pumping
it has an
involved.
air gap.
Yeah.
Yeah, always, and so what this is designed to do is take a piece of equipment that's pressurized. Where a hose might hook up and the pressure might be greater in the truck or other apparatus and backfeed the system. That's what it's designed to prevent. And I've never seen a water truck used that in that manner in Templeton, yet this is a requirement we're being stuck.
I've never seen any hydrant require a backflow preventer in
Well,
the
now
over
they
a
all
decade I've been.
It's all new.
It's all new.
It's some bureaucrat in some office thinks they are smarter than.
Well, I mean, I agree. Is it safer? Yes,
All
but
this
is
has
it
to
a?
be, backflow, they go bad.
Well, they
So
must
everything
be
has to
backflow.
be
Tested.
tested.
And maintained.
Annually probably, and somebody's gonna pay a fee.
Nah, you wouldn't be
and-
surprised.
What's going on?
So we're not gonna solve it, I think it is what it is, and I think we just have to deal with it. So it'll be back before this committee, I'm sure, again. So let's move on.
Justin, the change in the code, is that, have we already adopted?
No,
the-
no.
the
We need some policy updates.
The code itself is
program
pretty
itself,
minor,
have we already
the policy
adopted that?
changes are gonna relate to the hydrant meter
Well,
use.
Yeah.
The code changes have to do with just realizing that the cross connection control policy handbook that the state issued, it's not our plan in the
Oh,
code.
right,
It's
It's
the
in our-
preference instead
so
of
could
Title
we,
17.
could we wrap that into the changes?
Yeah,
that
we
wanna
could attempt
do?
to do this all at once.
Yeah, with the water code anyway.
Okay, let's move on to item number 6, utility activity report recommendations.
Yeah, we're looking for your feedback, if you.
So, yeah, let me pull
I'm
them up,
sorry.
so here we go, maybe have some idea of what we were asking for the committee. So, I wanted to just, show the committee and have a little discussion, monthly, Justin provides a utilities, activity update report. And historically, that's been these series of charts, and you're used to seeing those.
Yep.
Recently started adding some narrative to it. We were looking for your feedback on these charts and tables, because there's some extra work that we do, not we do collectively, not me do. I review it, hopefully get that part right, but, there's some, we collect this data, but these tables and charts are used only for this purpose. And we wanted to make sure there's value to the board in receiving them, because there is time spent in preparing them. And I wanted to get your feedback about, okay, of these various charts and tables that we provide, are there any that you just don't care about or don't add value to you? Because we'd be happy to remove preparing those. It would save us some time. Anyway, you're used to seeing this little packet of information every month. Like this is a comparison. Really, we started this back in 2013, back in 2016 when there were some drought requirements that we had to show savings compared to 2013, and we've kind of maintained that going forward. So this is like a whole year, well, it's months to date, but up to a whole year at a time. And then there's this water consumption report, consumption meaning metered water use, production meaning water produced at the well. They never line up for a number of reasons. Both those reports are put together. Production by source with the table, which shows the permit, the Greer, the riparian, the wastewater retrieval, Nasi water, groundwater, et cetera. That report's put together. Production by well, or which well was running in a given month compared to the prior year. River well production, so all of these various tables. And again, we collect this data, but it's populated in these particular tables just for your benefit. So what are these
So you
reports
don't
do you
use
like?
this at all?
I've used some of it for our reporting, yeah. I mean, it's sort of like a year-end stuff, or, the water reporting window. I kind of need like, okay, where were we at the end of the year, looking over the year? So
Right.
not monthly, but I do use the information.
Again, the data is gonna be collected. 'Cause
Yeah,
we
the
have-
data.
The data is
what we-
collected, but the
graphs,
formatting
the
here
formatting
is for the board.
Yeah,
So is there any of these that you'd say, hey, look, I don't bother paying attention to this stuff, you can.
love your feedback.
We'd love to reduce what we provide to you if it's not of value.
So, in
I mean, the individual wells, I mean, I'm okay. not
yeah,
having it.
but if it's the board, this all's going to the board. I would say that it's really a topic for the board.
Well, I've never really asked. So when I
Yeah.
got here 13 years ago,
I know.
we provided all of these and then I added this one because we had to start monitoring.
I can tell you what my preference is, but then it's like, there's other, 3 other board members that I think should also have some input into this as well. But some of these is
So we could
like,
just, take it to the board then.
yeah, so I think it
Well,
should.
do you have a recommendation we can take to the board? I mean, maybe we can make this pretty straightforward and say that the committee recommends eliminating these 3 or 4 or whatever, and we
Yeah,
can.
then there
We
could
could
be
do
more
that.
discussion.
So the water production comparison, I like looking at that.
I like that too.
Yeah, the water consumption report, I really don't look at that personally. The monthly production by source, I don't look at that.
Yeah, this graph, this stuff.
I mean, because
mean-
it's drilling down into too much detail, more than what I
Yeah,
need.
yeah, we need to, because we
You,
track, we
you,
track
you,
it
but
based.
I don't run the day-to-day
Yeah,
operation.
but
The well production, the water production by well,
No.
I don't care about that. The river well production, I don't care about that. You guys may, but I don't. And then the water production report, by year, I think we've really already have it covered in the first one.
it is.
Yeah,
Same
so I would
Yes,
say.
it is.
Yeah, so I would say that that's not needed. And then the Mellowbrook wastewater facility, I
No.
think it's too much detail for me.
So are you back to then just to try to simplify this? You want to
Yeah.
maintain,
That one there.
maintain this here,
Yep,
and
yep,
everything else
yeah.
can go.
Yeah, cause that's telling me really what your production is.
I mean, I kind of, the next one, can you go to
Go,
the next
yeah.
one? I like that
The
one too.
consumption, yeah, cause
Yeah.
that goes, but that kind of goes together. You've
Yeah.
got the
Yeah.
production and then consumption.
Yeah.
So I would say those two. But the discharge, well, Shelby discharge report. No, I would say no.
Okay, let me just to sort of streamline this and make this a productive discussion real quick.
Okay,
Is all of these exact, this whole set of items you're looking at right now is in Tuesday's board packet under the update. Would it be possible for the board president, just when we get to that point, just to highlight this and say the committee just discussed this? And if there's no objections, we're just gonna only be providing this narrative
first two.
and the first two charts going forward.
The narrative, okay.
Yeah, and then the rest, if no other board members object, I've never heard any of them ask about,
There's never any discussions or questions about it. It's information, but some of it is too detailed.
Yeah.
For, I think, our
and
purpose.
again, if we can cut down,
I'm not running the day-to-day operations to where I need to be concerned about what water is coming
Yeah,
from
and
what
then,
well.
and since you're doing narrative,
Yeah.
if there's any issues with the wells or
Yeah.
anything like that, you obviously put in your narrative, and I rather see the narrative and then.
Thank you.
That
Like
makes
what,
sense.
you know, like what.
Okay,
you
so I
do
think
with
we've got a
yours, so.
decision,
Right.
consensus, so we'll take to the board president will handle that discussion.
just note that this is what.
And then we'll just take the first two reports, production and consumption will remain, that's the recommendation of this committee. The other reports will no longer be provided to the board.
And if somebody has an objection,
Yeah.
then we can agendize it and talk about it further,
Yep.
but otherwise, that's what we'll be going forward.
Okay, our last agenda topic is future agenda items. So I think we talked about the cross connection control program update. Survey results when the survey's done. I'd be interested in seeing that. The backflow and some policy changes that need to be made there. And then also on the general permit update, I think we need some updates to this committee as well going forward. In terms of the response to your April 16th letter and ongoing discussions about our transition to meet the requirements in that permit.
Yeah, I think to be honest, you're probably gonna see from this point forward for the next decade, every time you. So,
We're gonna be
and
talking about it.
I'm not exaggerating when I say the next decade.
Yeah, and then I think for future, but this is going towards the board, is the water survey sewer unit payment plan that will go to the board.
Yes, that can
with
go,
those
likely
changes.
goes right to the board.
So those are kind of the things, a couple of items that I
We also have a need to have the draft of the master plan reviewed by this committee as it becomes, as we get closer to being final. So I would anticipate that a future
Yeah,
committee
March,
meeting will have
fall.
sections of the master plan come before you.
Okay. All right,
No,
anything else
that'll
that,
take a pretty big chunk of time, I think.
Yeah, probably several meetings to get through that.
okay, anything else that we need to add in future meetings? Okay, well, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting, so thank you.